fallen that rapidly if indeed fire caused the collapse. And in fact, there's one mechanical engineer, Gordon Ross, in the Journal of 911 Studies, who's done a thorough analysis based on conservation of momentum.
If the official story was correct, then the heating that was supposed to cause the failure would have been a much slower event, and it would have been an asymmetric event. For the tower to collapse straight down onto itself flies in the face of what we know about steel and how steel behaves. When we have a failure in one area, then the failures tend to continue within that area, and you see an asymmetric collapse, possibly the upper section falling off as it twisting away from the tower and falling off. But it's very unusual to see the upper section falling straight through the path of the greatest resistance, which was straight down through the middle of the tower. It just does not add up.
2. Molten metal exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit was discovered in the rubble of Ground Zero, underneath the Twin Towers and Building 7. Even with heavy rain on September 14th and 21st, a constant stream of fire retardants and water, described as creating a giant lake. These fires would not be extinguished until December 13th, 2001, making it the longest burning structural fire in history. Was the jet fuel responsible? Dr. Frank Gale, who was working with NIST, claimed in 2005. Your gut reaction would be that the jet fuel melted the steel. Indeed it did not. The steel did not melt.
The temperatures that we know existed within the collapse, within the debris pile, are physically impossible from an atmospheric jet fuel fire. It cannot be done.
I'm curious about the pool of molten steel that was found in the bottom of the towers.
I am too.
And
just tell me about it. Have you seen it?
Well, not personally, but eyewitnesses there found huge poles of molten steel beneath the towers, and some scientists don't think that the collapse of the building could have melted all that steel.
First of all, let's go back to your basic premise that there was a pool of molten steel. I know of absolutely nobody, and there's no eyewitness who said so, nobody who's produced it. I was on the site, I was on the steel yards, so I don't know that that's so.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel rails, like you're in a foundry. Like lava from a volcano.
Underground, it was still so hot that molten metal dripped down the sides of a wall from Building 6.
However, they do hit hot spots occasionally, and everything stops.
There were fires of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit below the ground.
I don't know that that's so.
There's video of it.
Melted around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's probably pretty difficult to get that kind of temperatures in a fire.
Well, NASA pictures, thermal images showed those sorts of temperatures in the basement.
Could you send them to me?
Okay. My name is Mark, and I'm the individual who was questioning Dr. Gross, and he asked me to email to him those thermal images. When I approached him after his talk to get his email address for that purpose, he refused to provide it to me. I think this is important because it reveals the attitude of the NIST investigators, which is one of willful ignorance of what really happened on 9/11.
As well as the molten metal in the debris, it was also observed prior to the South Tower's collapse. Also, a minute and 20 seconds before collapse, large amounts of white smoke begin pouring from the base of the South Tower. 3. The concrete, and in fact, virtually everything except the metal inside the Twin Towers was pulverized as the building collapsed. This pulverized material created pyroclastic dust clouds that raced down city streets, coating lower Manhattan in a fine dust. Pyroclastic clouds generally occur during two events: volcanic eruptions and controlled demolitions. Steel beams weighing up to 200,000 pounds were thrown laterally up to 500 feet. A cross-section from the World Trade Center, weighing approximately 300 tons, was embedded in the southeastern corner of the American Express building. This piece would have had to travel at least 390 feet, maintaining enough kinetic energy to embed itself in the corner of the building.
What we should have seen in the debris pile was a pyramidal shape. If it had been a gravity-driven collapse, we would have seen a roughly pyramidal shape or a conic shape. What we actually did see was a massive ejection of dust and debris and large sections of steel from well away from the towers, tens of meters away from the towers. That's hard to see a reason for that within a gravity-driven collapse.
5. Firefighters and eyewitnesses reported a series of explosions before and during the collapses.
And we heard the noise associated with an implosion. Secondary explosion on Tower 2. Some sort of explosive device.
We're obviously having a bit of trouble right now maintaining our location because we just heard one more explosion.
There was another major explosion.
Do you know anything about those extra explosions we heard?
No, I do not.
Were they car bombs?
I have no idea, ma'am.
The street shook, and I heard like an explosion.
Do you know if it was an explosion or if it was a building collapse? To me, it sounded like an explosion. We heard a very loud blast and explosion. They were taking photographs and securing this area just prior to that huge explosion that we all heard and felt. Not clear now is why this explosion took place. When there was some sort of collapse or explosion.
From street level, as though it had exploded up, a giant rolling ball of flame, and the firefighters screamed, "Run!"
It was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building.
You were picked up off the ground.
Physically picked up off the ground.
I remember an explosion. At that point, I got knocked out. I don't remember anything. Then I got up, and I looked out the window because the windows exploded, and the street below caved in. And at that point, there was like fireballs coming up.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that.
About 15 minutes after they made their entry, we heard a boom. I don't know if that was the infrastructure that was going or another explosion.
Again, there has been a second explosion.
John, just seconds ago there was a huge explosion, and it appears right now the second World Trade Tower has just collapsed.
All of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds.
It was like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then we finally got to the bottom. They were coming out on the mezzanine level there. And another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
We stuck on the stairs for a while. We finally got down to the lobby. Then we get to the lobby, it was this big explosion.
So I was real lucky. I don't know what happened to the people behind me when that blast occurred.
And it was actually on the 78th floor of the second tower, and was evacuating the tower and experienced all these explosions and made his way back down.
We presume because of the initial explosion there may have been secondary explosions as well that were detonated in the building by these terrorists.
There was a secondary explosion, probably a device either planted before or on the aircraft that did not explode until an hour later.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble and more smoke and more dust. I ran inside the buildings, the chandelier shook, and again black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
Eyewitnesses also reported that explosions had taken place in lower levels of both the North and South Tower.
They were having coffee in the World Trade Center when the first plane struck.
And all of a sudden it sounded like, I don't know where the subway is, but it sounded like a subway collision, a bomb, and it was just pounding, boom, 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 and I literally thought the subway had exploded. And
the ladies that are with me were in the World Trade Center in the first building and escaped through the lobby where they report they believe